The Grand Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floors, its curved walls reaching toward a dome that showed the stars beyond. 10,000 seats arranged in perfect circles housed representatives from across the galaxy. Each species had their designated section, marked by environmental controls that kept them comfortable in their preferred atmosphere. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the newest section, a small cluster of seats marked with Earth's blue and green symbol. Around her, the other human delegates looked tiny compared to the massive Dominion representatives with their stone-like skin and glowing eyes. The Zephyrians floated in their energy fields, their translucent bodies shifting between colors. The collective's representatives sat perfectly still, their shared mind making individual movement unnecessary. Sarah checked her datapad for the 15th time that morning. The vote on Trade Resolution 847C was supposed to happen today. She had spent 3 months preparing her arguments, gathering data and meeting with other delegates. The resolution would allow human ships to use the Kepler trade route, cutting travel time to the outer colonies by 60%. The delegate from Zerion Prime wishes to speak, announced the Assembly's AI moderator, its voice echoing through the hall in 1,000 different languages. A tall, thin creature with purple skin and 4 arms stood up. Honored Assembly, we must consider the environmental impact studies that were submitted only last week. I propose we establish a committee to review these studies over the next 18 months. Sarah felt her stomach drop. 18 months. The human colonies needed that trade route now. Their food supplies were running low, and the longer route through Dominion space cost 3 times as much. She pressed her speaking button. A soft chime indicated she could speak. Honored Assembly, Sarah began, standing up in the human section. Earth appreciates Zerion Prime's concern for proper procedure. However, our colonies are facing immediate shortages. We have provided all required documentation 3 months ago. The environmental impact is minimal as our ships use clean fusion drives. The Zerion delegate's 4 eyes blinked slowly. The honored human delegate misunderstands our concern. This is not about documentation timing, but about thoroughness. The galaxy has maintained peace for over 3,000 years through careful consideration of every decision. From the Zephyrian section, a shimmering voice spoke without anyone standing. The Zephyrian collective agrees with our Zerion colleagues. Haste leads to conflict. Better to wait than to risk disruption. Sarah looked around the hall. Most delegates were nodding in agreement. A few were sleeping, their species not affected by this particular issue. The collective representatives remained motionless, their decision already made through their shared consciousness. I request a formal vote on the immediate implementation of Trade Resolution 847C, Sarah said, her voice carrying across the hall. The AI moderator processed her request. A formal vote requires support from at least 10% of represented species. Please indicate support now. Sarah watched the voting display. Earth's vote appeared in green. One by one, a few other votes joined theirs. The Tau Coalition, who had similar shipping needs. 3 small mining worlds. A handful of independent systems. The count stopped at 8%. Insufficient support for formal vote, the AI announced. The resolution returns to committee for extended review. Sarah sat down hard in her chair. Around her, the other human delegates looked defeated. Dr. Martinez, Earth's science advisor, shook his head. 50 years, he whispered. 50 years of this, and we still can't get a simple trade route approved. The session continued with other business. The Dominion requested expanded mining rights in the asteroid Belt 7, a region close to human space. Their representative, a massive creature whose skin looked like polished granite, spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. The Dominion has maintained stability in this sector for centuries. These asteroids contain rare elements needed for galactic infrastructure. We propose a standard extraction operation. Sarah stood up immediately. Earth objects to this proposal. Asteroid Belt 7 is within our designated expansion zone, as outlined in the Human Integration Treaty of 2387. The Dominion delegate turned his glowing eyes toward the human section. The honored human delegate misreads the treaty. The expansion zone was designated for future consideration, not immediate claim. The Dominion has active use for these resources today. Future consideration means exactly that, Sarah replied. Those asteroids were set aside for human expansion when our population reaches the next threshold. We're less than 5 years away from that milestone. A Zephyrian voice drifted through the hall. Perhaps a compromise exists. The Dominion could extract needed materials while preserving the expansion zone for future human use. Sarah knew where this was heading. She had seen it dozens of times before. The compromise would give the Dominion everything they wanted while promising humans something in the distant future. Earth requests a detailed timeline for this compromise. She said the Zephyrian proposal requires careful study. The Dominion delegate replied, "We suggest a joint committee to explore options over the next 2 years." 2 years, Dr. Martinez muttered beside Sarah. By then, they'll have stripped every valuable asteroid in the belt. The vote on the Dominion proposal was called. This time support came quickly. The ancient species voted together as they usually did. Newer members abstained, not wanting to anger the powerful Dominion. A few small worlds voted with Earth, but it was not enough. The proposal passed with 73% support. Sarah felt a familiar anger building in her chest. She had felt it during every session, every committee meeting, every diplomatic dinner where other species smiled and nodded, while making it clear that humans were still the newest kids on the playground. After the session ended, Sarah walked through the assembly's corridors with her team. The walls were covered with artwork from across the galaxy, representing 3,000 years of peaceful cooperation. Beautiful murals show different species working together, trading, sharing knowledge. "Ambassador," called a voice behind them. Sarah turned to see Senator Vex from the Tau Coalition approaching. His people looked almost human, except for their silver skin and large black eyes. "Senator Vex?" Sarah nodded politely. "I wanted to apologize for the voting today," Vex said quietly. "The Tau Coalition understands your frustration. We face similar challenges with the older species. But you still vote with them when it matters," Dr. Martinez said bluntly. Vex looked uncomfortable. "We cannot afford to anger the Dominion or Collective. They control too much of galactic trade. It is better to wait and work within the system." "Wait for what?" Sarah asked. "Another 50 years? Another 100? The system works," Vex insisted. "Look around you. 3,000 years of peace. No major wars, no system-wide conflicts. Yes, it moves slowly, but it works." Sarah looked at the murals again. Peace was good. She believed in peace. But she was starting to wonder if this was really peace or just a very polite form of oppression. That evening, Sarah sat in her quarters aboard the human diplomatic station. Earth hung in the view screen, blue and white and beautiful. She was writing her daily report to the Human Council when her communication system chimed. "Ambassador, incoming priority message from Earth," her assistant announced. Sarah accepted the call. The image of Director Chen appeared on her screen. He was her older brother and head of Earth's diplomatic corps. "Sarah, I have news from the outer colonies," he said without preamble. "The food shortage on New Manchester is worse than we thought. They have maybe 6 months of supplies left." "What about the Kepler trade route?" Sarah asked, still in committee. "The Xerion delegate wants to study the impact on local space currents. It could take 2 years. Sarah closed her eyes. 2 years was too long. Way too long. "There's more," Director Chen continued. "Admiral Torres wants to speak with you. He's coming to the diplomatic station tomorrow." "The Admiral? What does he want?" "I think he's as tired of this diplomatic dance as you are, Sarah. Maybe it's time to consider other options." The call ended, leaving Sarah alone with Earth's image in her view screen. Other options. She wondered what the Admiral had in mind. Outside her window, the lights of 1,000 species ships moved through space, following trade routes and treaties that had been negotiated over centuries. It was orderly. It was peaceful. It was also slowly strangling humanity. Sarah made her decision. Tomorrow she would listen to what Admiral Torres had to say. Maybe it was time for Earth to try a different approach. Admiral Marcus Torres arrived at the diplomatic station with a face carved from stone and eyes that had seen too much. Sarah met him at the docking bay, noting how the Marine escorts flanked him like shadows. These were not the dress uniforms usually seen at diplomatic functions. These were combat veterans with hard edges and watchful eyes. "Ambassador," Torres nodded curtly as they walked toward her office. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Admiral, I have to say your timing is interesting. We just lost another vote yesterday and the colonies are getting desperate." Torres stopped walking and turned to face her. "That's why I'm here. We need to talk about Research Station Alpha 7. Sarah felt cold fingers crawl up her spine. Alpha 7 was humanity's deep space research station, located in neutral territory near the Dominion border. It housed 30,000 researchers and their families, working on advanced terraforming technology. "What about Alpha 7? She asked. "Sit down, Ambassador. You're going to want to sit down for this." In Sarah's office, Torres placed a datapad on her desk. The screen showed debris floating in space, twisted metal and shattered hull plates drifting against the stars. "Alpha 7 was destroyed 6 hours ago," Torres said quietly. "All hands lost." Sarah stared at the image, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. "How? Was it an accident? System failure?" "No accident." Torres touched the screen and the image changed to show weapon signatures. Multiple plasma cannon strikes. Military grade. The attack lasted 17 minutes. Pirates? No pirate fleet has this kind of firepower. Torres brought up another screen showing ship designs. "These are Dominion heavy cruisers. 3 of them." Sarah's hand started shaking. "That's impossible. The Dominion wouldn't attack a research station. It would be an act of war, would it?" Torres asked. "According to galactic law, what happens when a research station suffers an unfortunate accident in neutral space?" Sarah knew the answer, but she said it anyway. There would be an investigation. The Assembly would form a committee to determine fault and appropriate response. "How long does that usually take?" 5 to 7 years for major incidents. Torres nodded grimly. "And during those 5 to 7 years, what happens to the evidence?" "It gets studied, analyzed, reviewed by experts from multiple species. It gets contaminated, lost, or conveniently misplaced." Torres stood up and began pacing. "Ambassador, in my 40 years of military service, I've seen this pattern before. Not at this scale, but the pattern is always the same." Sarah's communication system chimed. "Ambassador, incoming emergency session notice from the Grand Assembly." "Accept it," Sarah said. The Assembly's AI moderator appeared on screen. "Emergency session 4427 will convene in 2 hours to address the unfortunate incident at Human Research Station Alpha 7. All delegates are required to attend." The call ended, leaving Sarah and Torres in silence. "Unfortunate incident," Torres said quietly. 30,000 people murdered, and they're already calling it an incident." 2 hours later, Sarah sat in the Grand Assembly Hall watching a carefully orchestrated performance. The Dominion delegate stood at the central podium, his massive form radiating what she supposed was meant to be sadness. "The Dominion deeply regrets the loss of Human Research Station Alpha 7, he intoned. "Our ships were conducting routine patrols in the sector when they detected unusual energy readings. By the time our vessels arrived to investigate, the station had suffered catastrophic failure." Sarah pressed her speaking button. "The honored Dominion delegate's timeline is inconsistent with our data. Our last transmission from Alpha 7 reported Dominion ships approaching, not investigating wreckage. Communications during emergencies are often confused." The Dominion delegate replied smoothly. "The human transmission may have been garbled or misunderstood." From the Zephyrian section, the familiar shimmer of their collective voice spoke. "The Zephyrian collective suggests careful investigation before drawing conclusions. Hasty accusations serve no one." Sarah looked around the hall. Most delegates were nodding in agreement. A few looked genuinely sympathetic, but sympathy would not bring back 30,000 lives. "Earth demands immediate access to the debris field for independent investigation," Sarah said. "Of course," the Dominion delegate agreed. "However, the area must first be secured and properly surveyed for additional hazards. This will require approximately 18 months. 18 months. By then, any evidence would be long gone. The Assembly will establish the Alpha 7 Incident Investigation Committee," announced the AI moderator. "Initial hearings will begin in 6 months with full investigation to follow established protocols." Sarah stood up slowly. 6 months for initial hearings? Then how long for the actual investigation?" The Zirian delegate answered from his section. "Complex incidents of this nature typically require 3 to 5 years for thorough investigation. We must be certain of our conclusions. 3 to 5 years, Sarah repeated, while evidence disappears and witnesses forget details." The honored human delegate seems to suggest the Assembly cannot conduct proper investigations, the Dominion representative said. "This is unfortunate. The Assembly has maintained galactic peace for millennia, through careful, thorough processes." Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, that was already broken. Something deeper. Something that had been holding her together through 50 years of diplomatic frustration. "Honored delegates," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. 30,000 human beings died yesterday. They were scientists, engineers, teachers, children. They were murdered while conducting peaceful research that could have benefited the entire galaxy. The hall was completely silent now. "You offer us committees and investigations and careful consideration. You offer us the same slow, careful process that has kept humanity at the back of the line for 50 years. The same process that just voted to give our expansion zone to the very species that murdered our people." Sarah looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. "Earth has tried to work within your system. We have followed your rules, respected your traditions, and waited patiently for our turn. Yesterday, our patients got 30,000 people killed." She gathered her data pads and stood to leave. "Where is the honored human delegate going?" asked the collective's representative. Sarah turned back to face the assembly. "Home, to tell my government that the Grand Assembly has decided that human lives are worth 6 months of committee formation and 5 years of investigation. The delegate cannot simply leave during an emergency session." The Dominion representative protested. "Watch me." Sarah walked out of the Grand Assembly Hall with her entire delegation behind her. The massive doors closed with a soft whisper, cutting off the rising voices of 1,000 species trying to restore order. On the transport back to the diplomatic station, Dr. Martinez sat beside her in silence for several minutes before speaking. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we pack," Sarah said. "All of us. Every human diplomat, every trade representative, every cultural attaché. We're going home. And then what?" Sarah looked out the viewport at the stars, each one representing systems with billions of lives. Somewhere out there, Dominion ships were probably already cleaning up the debris from Alpha 7, erasing the evidence of their crime. "Then we let someone else handle this," she said. "Someone who doesn't believe in committees and careful consideration." Admiral Torres was waiting for them at the docking bay. He took one look at Sarah's face and nodded. "I'll start the recall orders," he said. "Every human ship, every human citizen in Confederation space." "How long do you need?" 72 hours, Sarah replied. "After that, humanity is no longer bound by Confederation law." "And after that?" Dr. Martinez asked quietly. Torres and Sarah exchanged a look that carried the weight of 30,000 dead researchers and 50 years of diplomatic failure. "After that," Torres said, "we solve this problem the human way." The war room in Earth's orbital command station had never seen this many ships on its main display. Admiral Torres stood before the holographic projection showing the positions of every human vessel in known space. Red dots marked military ships, blue indicated civilian transports, and green showed supply vessels. All of them were moving toward rallying points outside Confederation territory. "Final count, Admiral," reported Captain Williams from her station. 237 military vessels, 412 civilian ships, and over 6 million humans successfully evacuated from Confederation space. "Any word from the assembly?" Torres asked. Ambassador Chen, Sarah had returned to Earth to brief the Human Council, activated the communication panel. "They're demanding we return to negotiations. The Zephyrians are offering to mediate. The collective wants to establish a special committee for human grievances. And the Dominion claims the whole thing is a misunderstanding. They're suggesting a cultural exchange program to improve relations." Torres studied the tactical display. Each red dot represented years of human engineering, training, and determination. The ships were smaller than most galactic standards. Humans preferred speed and efficiency over massive size. But what they lacked in individual power, they made up for in numbers and tactics. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Park from the intelligence station, "we're receiving reports from our deep space reconnaissance network. Dominion fleets are mobilizing. Show me." The display shifted to show Dominion ship movements. Heavy cruisers and battleships were moving away from their home systems, forming defensive positions around key infrastructure points. "They're protecting their administrative centers and major trade hubs," Park continued. "Classic defensive positioning," Torres smiled grimly. "They still don't understand how humans fight wars." Captain Williams looked up from her station. "Admiral, all fleet commanders are requesting orders. They want to know which targets to engage. Tell them to stand by." Torres turned to the communication panel. Open a channel to all Confederation worlds. Full broadcast all frequencies. The communications officer nodded. Channel open, sir. You're transmitting to the entire galaxy. Torres straightened his uniform and looked directly into the camera. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, and absolutely certain. This is Admiral Marcus Torres of the Human Defense Force. 3 days ago, Dominion vessels murdered 30,000 human civilians at Research Station Alpha 7. When Earth sought justice through proper diplomatic channels, we were offered committees, investigations, and years of careful consideration. He paused, letting the words settle across the galaxy. Humanity has withdrawn from the Galactic Confederation. We will no longer participate in diplomatic processes that value procedure over justice, or bureaucracy over life. Effective immediately, all Confederation trade routes passing through human-controlled space are closed. Torres gestured to the tactical display behind him. To the Dominion leadership, you had your chance to explain your actions through proper channels. You chose to hide behind committees and investigations. Humanity chooses a different path. The transmission ended and Torres turned back to his commanders. Begin Operation Simplification. Captain Williams raised an eyebrow. Sir, the fleet commanders are asking about target priorities. Should we begin with Dominion military installations? No, Torres said firmly. Military targets would just give them something to fight. We're not here to fight a war, Captain. We're here to solve a problem. The first phase of Operation Simplification began 12 hours later. Human ships emerged from hyperspace at communication relay stations throughout Confederation territory. These installations were lightly defended. They had never been considered military targets before. The attacks lasted exactly 17 minutes at each location, the same amount of time the Dominion had spent destroying Alpha 7. When they were finished, the galaxy's primary communication network was offline. On the bridge of the HSS Determination, Captain Elena Vasquez watched her tactical officer monitor the destruction of Communication Relay Station 47. Clean hit. Captain, reported the tactical officer. Station is completely offline. No casualties. The station personnel evacuated as soon as we decloaked. Good, Vasquez replied. Set course for the next target. Relay Station 51. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from a Zephyrian ship requesting to speak with our commander. Put them through. The Zephyrian's translucent form appeared on the view screen, its energy field flickering with what might have been distress. Human vessel, this is unacceptable behavior. These communication stations serve peaceful purposes. They are not military targets. Captain Vasquez looked at the alien with steady eyes. Neither was Alpha 7. Two wrongs do not create justice. The proper forum for resolving disputes is the Grand Assembly. The Grand Assembly had its chance. Now we're solving the problem ourselves. You cannot simply destroy galactic infrastructure. The consequences will affect billions of beings. Vasquez leaned forward in her command chair. Then maybe those billions of beings should have paid attention when 30,000 humans were murdered. The transmission ended, and the Determination jumped to hyperspace. By the end of the first week, humanity had destroyed or disabled over 200 communication relays, 75 major trade route navigation beacons, and 36 administrative centers. They had not fired a single shot at a military target or caused a single civilian casualty. The galaxy was going insane. Trade ships found themselves unable to navigate hyperspace routes without the beacon network. Planets that had not managed their own internal communications for centuries discovered they could not contact their neighbors. Administrative regions that had relied on central processing for routine decisions found themselves paralyzed. In the Grand Assembly Hall, panic was setting in. The humans have crippled our entire civilization, declared the Zarian delegate, his forearms gesturing wildly. They must be stopped immediately. How? Asked the collective representative. Their ships are faster than ours and they strike without warning. By the time our forces arrive, they are gone. The Dominion delegate's massive form radiated anger. The Assembly must declare humanity a rogue species and authorize military action. With what military? Countered a small voice from the Tau Coalition section. Half our fleets are lost because they can't navigate without the beacon network. On the main display, a map of the galaxy showed the extent of the damage. Red areas marked regions where communication was 75% offline. Yellow indicated partial communication loss. Green zones, mostly around heavily defended military installations, still maintained some connectivity. The pattern was becoming clear. Humans were not trying to conquer territory or destroy enemy fleets. They were methodically dismantling the bureaucratic infrastructure that held the Confederation. Together, we need to negotiate, said the representative from the mining guild. Contact the humans and arrange a ceasefire. How? Asked the Zephyrian delegate. They destroyed the long-range communication network. We cannot reach them. Then send a ship with a message. We tried that. The ship got lost because the navigation beacons are offline. In the silence that followed, the delegates began to understand what humanity was trying to teach them. For 3,000 years, the Confederation had built a civilization so dependent on central systems that no one remembered how to function without them. The Dominion delegate stood up slowly. The Dominion offers to use its military communication network to contact the humans. To what end? Asked the collective. To discuss terms. A month later, Torres received a message through back-channel communications. The Galactic Confederation was requesting a meeting to discuss the current crisis. Where do they want to meet? Asked Captain Williams. Torres read the message again. They're asking us to choose the location. What do you think, Admiral? Torres looked at the tactical display, now showing a galaxy where over 60% of administrative infrastructure was offline. Trade was grinding to a halt. Local conflicts were breaking out as planetary governments lost contact with regional authorities. The 3,000-year-old system was collapsing. Schedule the meeting for 1 week from today, he said. And Captain? Yes, sir. Choose somewhere practical. No crystal palaces or floating diplomatic stations. A simple conference room will do. Any particular message you want to send with the location choice? Torres smiled for the first time in weeks. Yes. Tell them that if they want to fix this mess, they're going to have to learn to think like humans. The galaxy was about to discover that the most terrifying thing about humans was not their willingness to fight, but their willingness to actually solve problems. The emergency meeting on Kepler Station took place in what had once been a storage bay. Metal chairs surrounded a simple table, while outside the windows the wreckage of galactic civilization drifted past. The Confederation's greatest diplomats sat in uncomfortable silence, waiting for the humans to arrive. Ambassador Chen entered with Admiral Torres and a small team of advisors. No ceremonial robes, no energy fields, no floating platforms, just humans in practical uniforms carrying datapads. Thank you for coming, Chen said, taking a seat at the table. I believe you wanted to discuss the current situation. The Dominion delegate shifted his massive bulk in a chair that was clearly too small for him. The situation, as you call it, is the collapse of galactic civilization. Trade has stopped. Communications are 70% offline. Local conflicts are erupting everywhere. Yes, Torres replied calmly. That does seem to be what's happening. You must restore the infrastructure you destroyed, demanded the Zerion delegate. Billions of beings are suffering. Chen consulted her datapad. According to our intelligence reports, the suffering is mostly limited to bureaucratic delays and supply chain disruptions. Actual loss of life has been minimal. The economic damage is catastrophic, protested the representative from the banking consortium. The galactic economy has contracted by 40% in 6 weeks. Interesting, Torres said. How much did it contract after Alpha 7 was destroyed? Silence. I'll tell you, Torres continued. 0%. The murder of 30,000 humans didn't even register as a statistical blip in your precious economy. The Zephyrian delegate's energy field flickered nervously. The Grand Assembly understands human frustration, but this approach helps no one. Surely we can return to negotiations. About what? Chen asked. You want to negotiate the restoration of a system that proved it values bureaucracy over justice. We're not interested. Then what do you want? Asked the collective representative. Torres leaned back in his chair. We want to see what rises from the ashes. The meeting broke up without resolution, and the delegates returned to their ships carrying a message that no one in the galaxy wanted to hear. Humanity was not planning to restore the old system. But while the Confederation struggled with collapsed infrastructure, something unexpected was happening throughout the galaxy. Local problems that had been stuck in bureaucratic limbo for decades were suddenly getting solved. On the mining world of Kepler 7, Administrator Janet Morrison received her 15th emergency request that week. Without access to the central bureaucracy, local planetary governments were having to make their own decisions. It was chaos, but it was productive chaos. Administrator, called her assistant, running into the office with a data pad. The water purification system in Sector 12 is failing. Normally we'd need approval from the regional authority, but they're offline. How long would that approval normally take? Morrison asked. 6 to 8 months, assuming no complications. Morrison stood up and grabbed her emergency kit. Get me a transport to Sector 12. We're fixing this today. Today? But the regulations require impact studies, environmental assessments, budget approval. The regulations are offline too, Morrison said with a grin. So we'll use common sense instead. 4 hours later, Morrison stood in the Sector 12 water treatment facility with Chief Engineer Rodriguez, watching as emergency repairs brought the system back online. That's it? Rodriguez asked, looking at the diagnostic readings. We replaced 3 filter units and updated the control software. Why did the old system require 8 months of approvals for this? Because, Morrison replied, the old system was designed to prevent mistakes, not to solve problems. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On the agricultural world of New Series, farmers were implementing crop rotation systems that had been stuck in committee for 5 years. On Epsilon Station, engineers were upgrading power systems using techniques that had been pending approval since before many of them were born. Captain Elena Vasquez watched this transformation from the bridge of her ship, now serving as a mobile problem-solving unit. Her orders from Admiral Torres were simple. Help anyone who asked, regardless of species or politics. Captain, reported her communications officer, we're receiving a distress call from the Arcturus system. Some kind of humanitarian crisis. On screen, the image showed a Tau Coalition official, his silver skin pale with stress. Human vessel, this is Governor Kex of Arcturus Prime. We have a medical emergency. A plague has broken out in our southern continent, but we cannot contact the regional medical authority for treatment protocols. What kind of plague? Vasquez asked. Unknown pathogen. Highly contagious. Our medical staff don't know how to proceed without proper authorization. Vasquez exchanged glances with her medical officer, Dr. Sarah Kim. How long would authorization normally take? 3 to 4 weeks for emergency medical protocols, Governor Kex replied. But by then, half your population could be dead, Dr. Kim finished. Captain, request permission to beam down with a medical team. Permission granted. Governor Kex will be planetside in 2 hours. But you're not authorized medical personnel, the governor protested. You don't have proper credentials from the medical authority. Vasquez smiled. Governor, the medical authority is offline. So are credentials, authorizations, and proper procedures. What we have is a doctor who wants to save lives. Are you interested? 6 hours later, Dr. Kim was working with local medical staff to implement quarantine procedures and distribute emergency medications. The plague, which had seemed so mysterious and threatening, turned out to be a variant of a common respiratory infection that could be treated with standard antibiotics. Why couldn't your people treat this themselves? Dr. Kim asked the local chief medical officer. The protocols require approval from 3 different authorities, the alien doctor replied. Medical intervention, quarantine procedures, and pharmaceutical distribution. Without proper authorization, people die while paperwork gets processed, Dr. Kim said bluntly. How did your species survive before the Confederation? The alien doctor was quiet for a moment. I don't know. No one remembers. That was the real revelation spreading across the galaxy. Species that had developed interstellar travel, built magnificent cities, and solved complex scientific problems had somehow forgotten how to make basic decisions. The Confederation's bureaucratic system had been so comprehensive, so all-encompassing, that entire civilizations had lost the ability to think for themselves. But humans remembered. More than that, humans thrived on the kind of rapid decision-making that the current crisis demanded. Within 3 months, human ships had become the galaxy's unofficial emergency response network. When the food distribution system on Vega 3 collapsed, human cargo vessels stepped in to maintain supply lines. When a solar flare knocked out communications in the Centauri sector, human engineers restored basic services within days instead of the usual months. The grateful worlds began offering payment, trade agreements, and permanent partnerships. Humanity was building a new kind of galactic network, one based on practical results rather than bureaucratic approval. Admiral Torres watched this development from Earth's command center, monitoring reports from dozens of human ships throughout the galaxy. Admiral, Captain Williams reported, we're receiving formal requests for assistance from over 200 worlds. Most of them are offering to leave the Confederation if we'll provide ongoing support. And the Confederation's response? They're threatening sanctions against any world that makes separate agreements with humanity. Torres laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time since Alpha 7. Sanctions enforced by whom? Their enforcement network depends on the same infrastructure we destroyed. Sir, there's something else. Intelligence reports indicate that several younger species are starting to adapt human-style decision-making processes. The Tau Coalition has eliminated their committee system entirely. The Mining Guild is implementing rapid response protocols for emergency situations. Torres studied the reports with growing satisfaction. Humanity had not set out to build an empire or conquer territory. They had simply demonstrated that there was a better way to solve problems. Captain, send a message to all human ships in the field, Torres ordered. Continue current operations, but add a new priority. Start teaching other species how to think like humans. Teaching them what, specifically? Torres looked at the tactical display, now showing a galaxy where human ships were racing from crisis to crisis, solving in days what had previously taken years. Teach them that committees are not the solution to every problem, that sometimes the best action is immediate action, that preventing mistakes is less important than saving lives. He paused, thinking of the 30,000 people who had died at Alpha 7 while the galaxy debated proper procedures. Teach them that the purpose of government is to help people, not to maintain itself. Outside Earth's orbital stations, human ships continued their work of rebuilding a galaxy, one practical solution at a time. And for the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, other species were starting to ask, how do the humans make it look so easy? The answer was simpler than anyone wanted to admit. Humans had never forgotten that the point of civilization was to solve problems, not create them. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Confederation, Admiral Torres stood in a converted warehouse on the neutral world of Haven. The space was practical, efficient, and completely lacking in the ceremonial grandeur of the old Grand Assembly Hall. Metal tables arranged in a simple grid pattern could seat representatives from 300 different worlds and species. The walls displayed real-time status boards, showing ongoing operations across the galaxy, food shipments, medical missions, infrastructure repairs, and conflict resolutions. Everything was measured in concrete results rather than procedural progress. Admiral, Captain Williams approached with her latest report. Final attendance count. 287 worlds confirmed, including 43 former Confederation Corps members. Torres nodded, watching as delegates filed into the warehouse. The difference from the old assembly was striking. No floating platforms or environmental suits, no ceremonial robes or energy fields. Representatives wore practical clothing and carried data pads filled with real problems needing real solutions. Ambassador Chen, now serving as Earth's Director of Galactic Relations, walked over from where she had been greeting arriving delegates. The Dominion delegation just arrived, she reported. 3 representatives, and they look subdued. Any word from the Confederation remnant? They're still meeting on Zephyr Prime, trying to restore their administrative network. Last estimate was another 18 months just to get their committee system back online. Torres almost smiled. 18 months to form committees? We've solved over 1,000 crises in that same time period. The opening session began with remarkable efficiency. No ceremonial speeches, no historical remembrances, no lengthy acknowledgments of ancient protocols. Torres stepped to the simple podium and began. Welcome to the first session of the Galactic Compact for Practical Governance. We're here because the old system failed. It failed to prevent the murder of 30,000 innocent people. It failed to respond to humanitarian crises. It failed to adapt to changing circumstances. He gestured to the status boards around the room. 2 years ago, this galaxy was in chaos. Today, trade flows efficiently through new networks. Medical emergencies receive response within hours instead of months. Local conflicts get resolved through direct negotiation rather than decade-long committee processes. A voice called out from the Tau Coalition section. Director General Torres, what gives humanity the right to restructure galactic governance? Torres looked directly at the speaker. We don't have that right. That's why you're all here. Humanity didn't rebuild this galaxy alone. We worked with anyone willing to prioritize results over procedure. Administrator Morrison from Kepler 7 stood up. The human approach saved my world. When our water systems failed, human engineers had them working in 4 hours. Under the old system, my people would have died of thirst waiting for environmental impact studies. Dr. Yoshi Tanaka, now serving as director of the Galactic Crisis Response Corps, activated a holographic display showing their operational statistics. In the past 24 months, mixed human and alien response teams have handled over 4,000 emergency situations. Average response time, 18 hours. Average resolution time, 72 hours. Under the previous system, these same situations took an average of 14 months just to receive initial committee assignment. The Dominion delegate, notably smaller than their previous representatives, stood up slowly. The Dominion acknowledges the efficiency of current operations. However, rapid decisions can lead to mistakes. The previous system's careful deliberation prevented conflicts. Torres felt a familiar anger, but he kept his voice level. Delegate, how many people died at Alpha 7 while your careful deliberation was preventing conflicts? Silence. How many crises festered into wars because your committees couldn't make decisions fast enough to matter? More silence. Captain Elena Vasquez, now commanding the Response Corps fleet, addressed the assembly. The old system didn't prevent conflicts. It just made sure they lasted longer. I've seen worlds torn apart by civil wars that could have been prevented with a single emergency food shipment. Instead, those shipments sat in committee for months while people starved. The Zephyrian delegate's energy field flickered nervously. But surely some oversight is necessary. Complete decentralization could lead to chaos. Dr. Kim, recently returned from her latest medical mission, stood up from the Earth section. Delegate, I've just finished dealing with a plague outbreak on Rigel 4. Local medical staff wanted to implement quarantine procedures, but they were afraid to act without proper authorization. By the time I convinced them that saving lives was more important than paperwork, the infection had spread to 3 continents. She looked around the room. The chaos you're worried about? That's what we had under the old system. What we have now is organized action. Governor Kex from Arcturus Prime requested the floor. The Tau Coalition proposes adopting the human governance model as the standard for compact operations. Which model specifically? Asked the banking consortium representative. Morrison answered. Problem identification, solution development, implementation, evaluation, and adjustment. Instead of committee formation, impact studies, procedural review, and extended deliberation. But what about mistakes? Asked a small voice from the mining guild section. Torres stepped back to the podium. We make mistakes. The difference is, we fix them quickly instead of spending years studying why they happened. He activated another display showing the compact's operational principles. Every member world maintains local autonomy. No central bureaucracy makes decisions for you. The compact provides coordination, resources, and rapid response when requested. If you don't like how something is working, you change it immediately rather than forming a committee to study change. A delegate from one of the newer worlds raised her hand. What about the Confederation? Are they welcome to join the compact? Chen answered this one. Any world that wants to prioritize practical solutions over bureaucratic procedure is welcome. Any world that wants to return to the old system of committees and careful deliberation is free to do so. And if the Confederation tries to interfere with compact operations? Torres' expression hardened slightly. The same response we gave when they tried to prevent us from solving galactic crises. We ignore them and do what needs to be done. The session continued for 6 hours, remarkably brief by the old Assembly's standards. By the end, the Galactic Compact had been formally established with a simple charter that fit on a single page. The charter's key principles were elegant in their simplicity. Members maintain complete local autonomy. The Compact exists to coordinate responses to problems that cross planetary boundaries. All decisions are made by simple majority vote of affected parties. No committee may delay emergency action for more than 24 hours. Any member may withdraw at any time for any reason. As delegates prepared to leave, many lingered to examine the status boards showing ongoing operations. Trade convoys, medical missions, engineering teams, and diplomatic corps were spread across the galaxy, each responding to immediate needs rather than long-term bureaucratic planning. The Dominion delegate approached Torres as the session ended. Director General, the Dominion requests permission to participate in compact operations. What kind of participation? Our engineering corps could assist with infrastructure projects. We have resources that could be useful. Torres studied the alien's massive form, remembering the wreckage of Alpha 7. Any world can request compact assistance. Any world can offer resources to help others. The question is, are you ready to act like humans? What does that mean? It means when someone needs help, you help them immediately. You don't form a committee to study whether helping them might set a precedent. You don't wait for proper authorization from higher authorities. You see a problem, you fix it. The Dominion delegate was quiet for a long moment. This is difficult for our people. We have maintained order through careful hierarchy for thousands of years. Then maybe it's time to try something different. 6 months later, Torres stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, flagship of the compact fleet, watching as a joint human-Dominion engineering team repaired a damaged space station in record time. The massive aliens had proven surprisingly effective once they stopped asking permission to help people. Admiral, Captain Williams reported, were receiving requests for compact membership from the remaining Confederation core worlds. Apparently their committee to restore the committee system has been stuck in committee for 8 months. Torres shook his head in amazement. Some people never learn. Send them the standard membership package. Same deal as everyone else. Help when asked, accept help when needed, and make decisions quickly enough to matter. And if they want to maintain their committee structure, let them. As long as they don't use it as an excuse to avoid helping people. Torres looked out at the stars, each one representing worlds where practical governance was replacing bureaucratic paralysis. It wasn't perfect. Humans were still making mistakes, conflicts still arose, and some problems had no easy solutions. But people we,